So, returning to our subject, even though it's a little difficult to speak about difficulties, disappointment, distress, and disasters without turning to our intelligence and our philosophical understanding, that tends to sort of just push them aside as saying, oh, this is just Maya, this is just imagination, this is just the material world. And then so we push them away with our intelligence, but they seem to sort of linger. So there's an interesting dynamics here between the fact that we know so much, and hopefully we've all read the Bhagavatam and we found our own sources of strength and inspiration. And yet at the same time, these difficulties just seem to sort of, they take over. And they have a life and a force and a power of their own. So this is a very interesting thing to think about sometimes. It's important actually to think about, because as we explained, it's one thing to speak philosophy, it's the theory, but we need to see how much and how well we're actually able to put that into application during the different challenges that inevitably come within our journey of life. So I was preparing actually a class for another occasion, and I was reading through the Bhagavatam, trying to find a powerful verse on which to speak. And I made my way through to the 12th canto, where I found in the end of the 12th chapter of the 12th canto, there were verses that sounded remarkably familiar. And I thought, I think I've read this verse somewhere before. And as I looked at the verse, I thought, I know I've read this verse before. I think it's in the first canto. And I very quickly turned back to the first canto, and I found that Sutta Goswami is speaking very similar verses in the first canto, one or two of them, and also almost identical in the 12th canto. And they have to do with the process of glorification of the Srimad Bhagavatam and the power of transcendental sound. So I took that little section from the 12th canto and tried to understand how it amplified the message given in the first canto, which is in the chapter where Narada and Vyasa are speaking. But this one particular verse, which is not a repeated verse from the Bhagavatam, from Sutta Goswami's transcendental lips, but is a specific verse, to me, more or less, although I've seen similar verses throughout the Bhagavatam, because the Bhagavatam is Krishna. It's Krishna. And he's very, very reassuring. Yesterday we were hearing about the attitude that a devotee should have, that he should think that what I've done in my life I deserve much worse than what I'm receiving, even in times of difficulty. But Krishna is not like the, I don't know if there's an Indian similarity, but in the Christian tradition, God he's very intolerant. Or in the Muslim tradition, he's very intolerant. He wants the heads of all those people who don't submit. It's frightening. So in the Judeo-Christian paradigm, God is very frightening. And so it's quite shocking for somebody coming from this background, I can say for myself, when you come towards this 10th canto Krishna playing as a little boy, playing naughty, misbehave, drinking his mother's breast milk. This may be very natural for somebody who has the sanskars to understand. But for somebody who God is very frightening, it's a little bit too informal. What's this? How can he be this almighty God? And so, interestingly enough, we fall into the category that Lord Brahma fell into. We think, how can this be God? This can't be God. He's got to be much more powerful than this. So in our sense of his searching for his power, there's automatically fear. Much more powerful than us, and if we do something wrong, he could just drop something on our head and that would be the end. Through the conception of Krishna that is given to us through the Srimad Bhagavatam, this fear, we are asked to remove this fear. This fear stands in the way. Even the sense of reverence with which we stand with our hands folded very thoughtfully and carefully, not to make an incorrect move. This also, as one advances, in the beginning you must have reverence. Otherwise you'll have irreverence, and irreverence will not help you in any way. And fear is better than defiance. But once one is willing to not be defiant, then fear is not required. It's the incorrect response. So if you glorify somebody out of fear, you get a certain kind of a result. You're sort of saying, "You're wonderful, stay over there." Please don't, do anything to me and my family. Please just, you can protect us, please, but please don't. There's no love in that. There's no love capable when there is fear. And this is the living entity's core problem. Because of our defiance, which is inherent actually, even though now we're wishing to correct it, inherent also is fear. And as this defiance, which is ruling us now, and which causes all the dissatisfaction, disappointment and everything else, as that defiance is reduced. Do you have a question?
I don't understand defiance. What does it mean?
Defiance means to consciously disobey somebody. You see children when they're defiant, their parents will say to them, "Put this over there," and they will say no. They will do the opposite of what their parents are requesting. So defiance is it's inbred in the jiva when he comes to the material world. This is why we came. There's no reason to be here if we weren't defiant. There's a whole other realm where we're meant to be in pure consciousness. And we ourselves have pure consciousness already. We think, "Oh, I'm struggling so much. Oh, I'm such a demon." No, we have pure consciousness. It's never removed, but it's covered. It's covered. And why is it covered? Because we want to be independent of Krishna. Independent masters of something. Independent enjoyers of something. Independent owners of something. And that something that we want to independently own, enjoy, or master belongs to Krishna. And we belong to Krishna. And that's a little crazy. We can never be that. And so in order to protect us from becoming nothing, if you can't be something, like, if somebody says, "I want to be a movie star," and they have none of the qualifications to be a movie star, they might end up being a nothing. So in order to protect us from becoming a nothing, Krishna kindly gives us the illusion. Yes, you can enjoy. Yes, you can be a master of something. Yes, you can do these things separate from me. And here is a realm in which you can look around left, right, all around 360 degrees and see people doing it. So you can be sure you can do it. You can become independent. You can say, and many people say, "I'm not sure if I believe in God." You can make it an arbitrary thing. Some people, because they're a bit weak, they believe in God, but you don't have to. And therefore, when you hear Krishna speaking with full authority as a Supreme Personality of Godhead, some part of our heart says, "I'm not sure if I accept that." Now, we can become aware of that, and then we can do something about that. Or we can be unconscious of it, and then we don't think we have a problem. So it's very important that these difficulties come to us because they're concomitant with our choices that we've made. Not only the choices we're making day by day, should I go this way, should I turn left, should I drive my car on this road or that road, not those choices, but the subtle underlying choice to remain the possessor. I possess something, it's mine. As soon as I hold onto it as mine, you will get these four things, and many more difficulties will come. And they're meant to ask you to look more carefully at what you're doing. And they're meant to ask you, are you happy doing this? And Krishna says, are you happy doing this? It's like if you have a little boy and he's doing something ridiculous and he keeps doing it and doing it and doing it and he won't stop doing it. He's doing it. You look at him as a parent, are you happy doing that? And he'll look at you and go, yes, I'm happy doing this. I keep doing it. And he's doing some ridiculous thing. But we don't understand that what we're doing in the material world is ridiculous. It's pointless. It's meaningless. Because we're trying to possess things that will never be ours. They'll pass through our hands in the same way you hold your hands like this with a big, what do you call this? When you put your hands together, you take a big palmful of water. You hold it like this, and what happens? It drips down through all the crevices between your fingers, and it just drips down until you're left with just wet hands. That's what material life is like. So it's very, 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 very important to understand the nature of the material world. And therefore the Bhagavatam speaks in many places, in the 3rd canto, in the 5th canto. It speaks, Krishna speaks, explaining the material world and the miseries of it. And when we're in that spirit of achievement, I can do something here, I'm really going to have a fantastic life. When we come to those parts of the Bhagavatam, we go, oh, the Bhagavatam is so negative. You know, why is it so negative all the time? But as the fever, as Srila Prabhupada describes it, as the fever of material enjoyment goes down, how? By the experience of these things. Disappointment. I thought I was going to be a this, I'm a that. And difficulty. I hoped it was going to be really easy for me. I was going to do this, this, and this. I didn't think about that, that, and that. I was going to get married and I was going to have a happy ever after life. I've seen other people look happy. I want to be happy. And then I've got this problem and that problem, and why my child isn't as attractive as their child, and this thing and that thing, and on and on. And even if you try to just say, oh, I'm not going to think like that, the mind seems to have a life of its own. It just goes, no, and you have to listen to it. You're forced to listen to it. In the same way as if you're sitting next to somebody who's playing some kind of a player very loudly, and you can't get away from it. You ask them to turn it down, and they refuse to turn it down, and other than kind of like beating them or something, you're going to have to listen to it. So that's our mind is like that. We listen on and on and on and on and on. So it's very, very important that we come to see the inconveniences of life in the proper way. And this is why we're hearing that the devotee, as they're maturing, more and more they're learning how to see that this inconvenience that's come upon me is somehow Krishna's mercy. Now this is very important to understand. It doesn't mean that Krishna is up there somewhere in the sky with his computer and calculator, figuring it all out and just dropping problems in front of us one after another. As if to say, you see, try that. You go out of that, okay, I'll try another one. And it sounds very silly, but I must laugh at myself because in the early years of my Krishna consciousness, I genuinely felt like this, especially with Srila Prabhupada. Because he would ask us to do what seemed to be superhuman things. And then he would expect you to double it. Double it? You've got me absolutely exhausted with what I'm trying to do now, and you want me to do more? And we were in Hong Kong, and it was one thing after another, and now we can talk about it and say how glorious it was. But it didn't feel glorious at the time. It just felt like one strain, one stressful weight on the shoulder, including upon another and another. And I came to the conclusion when I was about 5 years a devotee that this is what Srila Prabhupada's business was. He would put something in front of you that you found impossible to do, he'll give it to you, and you've got to do it because he's your spiritual master. Oh boy, you've got to do it, so you try, start working really hard at it, and after a while you get a bit good at it, because anything you do you get better at it, so you get a little bit good at it, and then he turns around and sees that you're getting good at it, and so he says, okay, try this, and he gives you something more, and again you're like, oh no, this is so hard, you're trying to get, and all the time, and I thought, this is what it's going to be for eternity. This is my relationship with God. All the time, a little bit more stress, until maybe either I break, and then I break into something that I didn't know I was, it's sort of inside or something, but it's very, very stressful. And this was how I was feeling towards Srila Prabhupada at a certain point in my Krishna consciousness. This was in 1975 here in Melbourne, and also when we moved towards America. And it was very unhealthy actually, very, very unhealthy. And it stemmed from misunderstandings, obviously. But I didn't understand what a misunderstanding was. I was too immature. So I was carrying this sense of fear, this sense of... And I didn't have it in the beginning, because in the beginning it seemed easy, but it got harder. And so then, at a certain point, we had a very blessed darshan with Srila Prabhupada, an essential darshan too, because without it I don't think I would have remained very long as a devotee. I would have left with a very bad taste in my mouth, and I would have been convinced that this was not something that was beneficial to most people. But Srila Prabhupada saw the unhealthy condition, and he took some time with us, and he also was puzzled actually. He was actually puzzled. It wasn't that he empathized with us. He was like, what is the problem? Because he's seeing in a healthy way. So a person who's seeing in a healthy way, a doctor, when you walk into the doctor's office and you tell the doctor, doctor, I've got all these symptoms. He immediately says, what is the problem? Because he's healthy. So he wants to see how to cure your problem. If you walk into the doctor's office and think, everyone should have all these symptoms, and he's got a problem, he doesn't have a headache, what's wrong with him? So sometimes we think in these funny ways. So using my own embarrassing example, I remember we sat down and Prabhupada said, what is the difficulty? And Prabhu said, it's not my difficulty, Srila Prabhupada, it's her difficulty. Spontaneous. And I was like, certainly, obviously it was my difficulty. And I tried to work out what my difficulty was. But I couldn't say to him something like, I'm scared of you. I couldn't say that to Srila Prabhupada. I never would think of saying such a thing. It was so out of place. But indirectly, gradually, as I began to relax with him, somewhat, because he was always guru, I began to say things like, when we were in Hong Kong, it was so difficult. And then he said things like, then why did you stay there? And I thought, why did I stay there? You made me stay there. He's very expert. Why did you stay there? you could have gone to stay with your mother and father. Why didn't you tell me? I'm like, we did tell you. He was very mysterious, an excellent doctor. But he went on and on into the difficulties, and some of them came up, and some of them remained and came up later. But as they came up, I look at his face, and despite whatever he was saying, whatever clever ways he was psychologically trying to work on improving my state of mind, his eyes, I remember his eyes, he was so concerned. Just like if you go to the doctor and he looks at you and realizes, oh, this person has got a life-threatening condition. You may solicit from the doctor his full concern. He may give full attention to you for some time. So Srila Prabhupada's eyes were so concerned. How to get this girl out of this confused state of mind. And I remember one time he started talking to me, he spoke to me about marriage, husband and wife, because Prabhu had said, I think it's her difficulty. So he was wanting to correct my state of mind. So he was speaking about the importance of intermarriage. The wife follows the husband, and he was talking like this, and inside I was thinking, oh, why is he telling me all of this? I can't do this. I don't even want to do this. I'm a Western girl. I want to say these things. But I couldn't say anything, so I was sitting there and he's saying, in India the culture is so nice. The wife, she follows the husband, and if the husband is away, she misses him so much. And our relationship was exactly opposite to that. So finally I got up, out of exasperation, stop. I said, but Prabhupada, I wasn't brought up in this way. And he just looked at me very calmly, telling. Previously he's speaking Puranic history. Now he's speaking into the future. And as he's speaking, as you read this first chapter of the 12th canto, you begin to see how degradation is coming, declining. The leadership is declining, down, until there comes a point where there are many leaders, and they're completely corrupt, and they have very erratic tempers, and they're always looking at other people's wives, and they want women, and they want wealth, and they're plundering. And if you look closely, you can see this today. If you examine the character, not the characteristics, but the character of many of today's leaders, there's so much corruption. Because power corrupts. If you don't have a very, very strong character and a very, very pure heart, when you get all this power, and it goes to your head, and you start thinking, and this is actually what he explains, that these kings start thinking, how can I keep this role, this position, this post, and give it to my son? He should also rule the country, and my grandsons, and my whole family. We're going to take over. We're going to do this, and this, and to do that we have to get rid of those and those because they're our enemies, and we have to work out this, and we have to work out a strategy, and I have the army at my disposal, and I have this, and I have that, and I'll get this, and I'll take that, and I'll control like this, and this, and this. This is how the mind works. Of a corrupt leader. And Kali Yuga is full of corrupt leaders. On every level. It's one of the symptoms of Kali Yuga. And in the third chapter, Bhumi Devi laughs sarcastically at all these so-called kings who are trying to control her, as we heard yesterday. They want control. And we're like little tiny Ishwaras. We say, I don't want a country, it will be too much of a headache. I only want this. Now don't touch this is mine, okay? Don't bother me. So we want something from the earth, something from this world we want as ours. But Maharaj Cricket wasn't like that. He was never like that, and especially he wasn't like that when he's hearing about Krishna's pastimes. He's hearing and hearing, and then Sukadeva Goswami gives him his last instructions. And after that, then he asks the king, are you ready? And he says, please give me permission now. After worshipping his guru, he says, please now give me permission to take my mind and focus it fully in meditation on the Lord. And he does that. And when he focuses his mind completely on the Lord, his senses become inactive, inert. He doesn't need a material body. Because now he's focused on the absolute substance of reality. And so he's focused like that, and he just stops breathing. And his material body remains just sitting there. So by the time the snake bird concoction who was supposed to kill him arrives to kill him, he has already left this world. And his body is just sitting there. And the bird comes, snake bird comes in, first in the form of a Brahmin who comes very near, and then he turns into a snake and a bird mix, and he bites the king, and his body goes up in flames. And everybody cries, laments. Oh, why? Because he's so dear to them. He's the king. He's a righteous king. We can't even imagine that. There's no one like that. Even the next person comes in and his publicity is good. Says, he's going to do everything for the people. He's going to stop this bad habit. He's going to stop this. And in a little while we think there's some hope. But who can turn around Kali Yuga? Nobody can. So this king is the last king out of this. And everyone is crying. But Maharaj Cricket himself, he's gone. He's gone to where he belongs. And that's what we have to do. We have to go to where we belong. But in order to do that, we have to trust that there is such a place. We have to meet somebody from there who can tell us, oh, yes, you must come. This is where you belong. There's a simple story that is told to children in schools about a duck. It's called the ugly duckling. And this is one duck, I'm sure you've heard it, who's a little peculiar. And all the other ducks don't like this one because he's just a little different in shape and size. And so when he tries to kind of nudge in with the whole group of ducks, the flock all kind of move away from him. They don't like him. And he tries in various ways to make himself comfortable with the flock of ducks. But every time he does it, the ducks just kind of push him away. Go away, you're strange. And so then he feels so lonely because he can't fit in. And one day he's wandering by himself with this deep feeling of loneliness. Why do they treat me like that? Why is my life so difficult? And he's wandering along and he sees another group. And he sees this group and they're very, very peaceful. And as soon as they see him, they go, oh, come, come. And they welcome him. And he's astonished. They're so nice to me. And he goes closer and he doesn't understand anything. But the story is that, of course, the second group are swans. They're not ducks. And he too was a baby swan, wandering around in the company of ducks. So we're always out looking for baby swans, wandering around in the company of ducks. And we welcome them and say, please, come and be with the swans. Because the swan's business is to discern. A swan can take, if you mix milk and water together, a swan can take the milk and leave the water. You can take the best part and leave the rest. Those ducks kind of splash around and they're quite clumsy and they make a lot of mess and they're very loud and everything. The swan is more delicate, more graceful, more subtle. Of course, we welcome ducks as well. But we particularly welcome swans. They fit in. So, we want to somehow or another understand where we belong. We want to somehow or another understand that we are not ducks, we're swans, which means that we are not material bodies and minds and people as we call ourselves. We are temporarily people, we're not impersonal, but this body that we're wearing is like our clothes. I'm certainly wearing this black jacket today. I can't deny it. But I will take it off later if the weather changes. And I won't, when I take it off, I won't feel like, oh my gosh, what just happened to me? I'll just take it off. So for somebody who is actually in transcendental consciousness, they see everything, as we heard, as the mercy of the Lord, and they use whatever they have acquired by their past, previous activities, they use it and they try to offer it to Him. They try to please Him with it. In the same way as if you want to worship the Ganga, Mother Ganga, you take some water, everyone knows, and you pour it back into the Ganga because Ganga water is so valuable that we give her back her own valuable water as an offering. So there is something very profound in that. Everything belongs to Krishna, but it's landed in my care, so I want to give something back to you, a